It is the breakdown. Apropos that we would have a couple of calls there with Shaq Evans and Brandon Banks as we will get into some receiver duos coming up for you. Thanks for being here, as always, with us at DT on SC. That is Derek Taylor on the other side of the extremely socially distanced Zoom call. I am at TSN_Marsh. Marshall Ferguson here of Canadian Football Perspective. As always, brought to you by our friends at Fox 40. If you want the close vicinity line, it's designed to help you return to play safely. For 15% off all your whistle needs, visit fox40shop.com and use our promo code CFP15. You get 15% off at checkout. And of course, heading towards the CFL season, make sure you're using the promo code CFL during checkout at sawdustcitybeer.com. They have got some summer goodies over there for you. You got to live in Ontario to get this bad boy. Must be of legal drinking age. I know a lot of people have been enjoying that, saving about $15-20 on your order, around $100 or so. Team up with a couple of your friends and get set for some hot summer, well, close to fall nights by the time that we get going. Is Derek Taylor rocking the Peloton shirt today? You big Peloton guy?
I'm the is this the Century one? Oh, it's the 100. When I did my 100th bike ride, they send you a free t-shirt. And it's cool. The only way you can possibly afford Peloton branded gear, because t-shirts are like $75 and shorts are $1,000 and it's $1 million for a hoodie. Like, golly.
Yeah, I've heard that stuff is expensive. No, it's funny. So random side story here on our adventures of conditioning as play-by-play man, because you try to keep the lungs in shape, right, DT? It helps.
Obviously, yeah. You really work the low registers. You get that Rod Smith exercise going, yeah.
So I actually had a TRX band, okay? TRX, I'm a big believer, love working out with the TRX, take it anywhere, latched onto a tree. Don't go to public school playgrounds and latched on there. It's weird. But you throw it on different places wherever you want, and you can basically, I love taking it with me on the road. That's part of why I fell in love with it. So you can get a lot of different things done with it. And I had one of these rubber bands. It sounds really stupid, right? It's very childish, but I had this TRX band and it snapped after having it for like a year and a half. And I didn't know what to do. And I went on their website and everything. I was like, can I just order I don't care if I have to order 20 of them. I'm so used to having this thing, this like solid rubber band on my wrist. And I ended up buying another TRX just to get the band because it was included in the package. What? Yeah, because they don't sell it separately. You have to buy an actual TRX in order to get the band. So I got it back, which shows you how poor my judgment is. So
that's outstanding. I can just imagine just hauling that to a schoolyard. Hey kids, who wants to get their pump on? And you immediately go to jail and don't pass go.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, that's but yeah, TRX is fantastic. It's probably an underrated apparatus, as I think a lot of people may not know about it. Love it.
I bet you Trevor Harris uses TRX. I enjoyed the Edmonton conference call as we get lead up to the season, where he was talking today about going to the TB12 training centers and talking to the body coaches and taking on the diet and doing the workouts. He's got his nutritionist certificate. He's a personal trainer now. He's got all this stuff. And he basically was like, you know, when I went in and I started showing them my workouts and how I prepare and how I think the game and how apparently a bunch of the body coaches were like, you got to meet Tom. You got to meet Tom, man. This sounds like you and Tom would really like connect. You would kind of get each other. And, you know, Trevor's talking about wanting to play deep into his career. And I'm like, well, his playing style certainly fits the type of guy that could last long into his career, get the ball out quick, throw the intermediate stuff efficiently, have your accuracy. So I'm listening to this and I'm like, that's great. And then another side of me goes, this sounds like the body coaches at TB12 were just giving them the old sales pitch. Like, yes. Oh, you got to meet like our grandmaster for sure. Yeah. You should meet him at the tent. Come to the big village. Come on into the big tent. Well, I was like, Trevor, are you being Ponzi schemed? I really hope not.
If you buy a 96 bottles of alkaline water,
oh yeah,
you could get a Tom Brady TRX band. Like,
no,
it's
almost as bad, DT, as when Sports Illustrated got bought by like Maven Industries or whatever it was, and they tried to sell the brain formula. Because I love Tom Brady. I've always loved him. As I grew up a Tom Brady fan, playing quarterback, trying to emulate some of the stuff that he did. And then he launched his brand, and I saw, you know, the diet that's in the TB12 method book. I'm like, this is just vegan based. Like, there's nothing. Everybody that's ever eaten vegetarian or vegan, I'm like, that's what this is. And then I looked at the training disciplines, and I'm like, this is known as Tabata training. Most of it, which I'm like, if people just Google Tabata training, I'm like, that's what this is. But he brands it as, but it's Tom Brady. And then it's like all these things that are commonly understood in the health and wellness industry, and they're just thrown in there, and he labels it as Brady. And all of a sudden it's like, it's the TB12 electrolytes. It's like, I'm pretty sure it's just Mio. Like, I'm pretty sure he's selling Mio with a TB12 label wrapped around it. And the other one that always kills me is there's a company called Hypersphere, it's Hyperice, I think is the name of the official company, but they sell a ball that's like the vibrating rollers and stuff. I have them, and I got them from the people at BioSteel in Toronto, where I, drove in, and they had some kicking around because they saved them for their NHL guys in the off season that come to train there at St. Mike's in Toronto. And so I went and I actually picked them up, and I came home, and then I was reading about some TB12 stuff like a year and a half later. They're like, it's the TB12 pliability ball. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, that's just the Hyper Ice product rebranded as Brady's. Like, they've mastered taking things that are good for you and rebranding it as Brady stuff and then calling it the method. I'm like, what a simple business plan.
I just curious. I've never read TB12, but where he takes that Gwyneth Paltrow jade egg and where he shoves that, I'd be curious to read that section. But other than that, I don't. $200 pajamas with copper. Come on. I think I can find my scams way cheaper than that. Come on.
That is true. The introductory press conferences have been fun. We have gone through right now, I believe, I wasn't actually on the Winnipeg one, but I was on Saskatchewan, Edmonton, Calgary, I think Toronto might be, by the time that people are listening to this, coming out some quotes and different things, but they've been pretty enjoyable. I've been bouncing around and asking a couple of questions here and there. The one that jumped out to me before we get to the real news of the Saskatchewan call was Cody Fajardo being down a little bit in weight and by his choosing, which I tweeted this out so people might have seen it. But for those of you who didn't, he said that he basically dropped down his weight a little bit because he's not focused on short yardage anymore, taking a pounding and trying to survive all these defensive tackles and linebackers lunging over the top and ripping them off the pile. He's focused on core stability because the obliques obviously were the downside at the end of last year, 2019, I should say. And he's focused on, I found this interesting, pocket stability. That's a term that I have never really heard used that often, but pocket stability is a perfect two-word encapsulation of so many of the great quarterbacks that have played in the CFL. Because obviously everybody goes, well, mobile. You got to be able to run. He said he was focused on that too, but really what he's focused on is pocket stability, where he's like, I can have an arm brush my shoulder pads. I can have somebody swipe me. I can have someone grabbing at my shoelaces. And I need to be able to stand tall in the pocket and look down the field confidently. I'm like, man, can you imagine if Cody Fajardo, on top of the athleticism and the ability to get the ball out quickly and the zone read stuff and so much of what he did successfully in 2019, where he had a really strong statistical season, DT, if he was able to become the guy who sees a free blitzer looping inside and he just stares him down and is like, that's fine. I got Shaq Evans on a skinny post over the top of your free safety who's flat-footed. I'm just going to throw this thing as high as I possibly can and let Shaq run underneath it. If he does that, all of a sudden, I'm like, whoa, that's a scary thought for a lot of people, I think, in this league.
Yeah, and you would see that at practice in 2019. That was something that Steve Walsh was the quarterback coach of the Riders in 19, first-round NFL draft pick in Steve Walsh. And you would see them working on stuff like that. Like Cody would take his drop, and Walsh would kind of grab him by the side of the collar as he tried to throw the ball, just to jerk it in some fashion, and not violently or anything like that, because it's practice after all, but just to focus that in his mind. And that's one of the things kind of as Riders fans we watch for, because when Cody would be under pressure in 19, he would do, every Rider fan knows, he would reverse spin out and scramble, and he's out of the pocket. And he did that until Anthony Gator obliterated him one day, as Gator knew the spin was coming, and Cody just spun right chest first into Anthony Gator, just wrecking him. So you think of, okay, well, he's always going to have that spin move. That's something he's had, I think he said his entire life he's been using that one. But if you just stand there and step up and take you're going to take a lick, right? How many plays have we seen Mike Riley make, taking
Michael Riley.
Is that a for real thing?
I wasn't joking about that. I got that note from someone at the CFL that said, moving forward, Mike Riley would like to be known as Michael Riley. And I was like, does he have a son that I don't know about where he wants to call himself like Michael Riley Sr. and he wants his kid to be Mikey? I was like, but yeah, he's Michael Riley. Like, I don't know when you guys are going to find out in play-by-play and other thing, but like CFL.ca editorial staff, we were told his name is Michael Riley moving forward. I'm like, I feel so stupid saying this, but I guess if that's what he wants, that's what he wants.
Yeah, when I met him at the Grey Cup, it was, hey, Mike, how's it going? And he was, I don't know. Anyway, whatever he wants to be called, he's a stud, and I will call him. He wants to be called Derek. I'll just give him my name, and I'll take another name. That's absolutely
I'll
fine.
be you, Michael. I'll be you, Michael.
Exactly. But yeah, no, if Fajardo can add that element of standing in there and toughness, oh man, to the number 1 rated deep ball passer as well, and all the other things you mentioned, 8 touchdowns on designed runs. He's got so much going for him in his game, and I think Rider fans are just deliriously excited to go, well, what's he done in his time off, and what will Jason Moss do to him when they're back together? Yeah. It's very exciting.
So the other quarterback note that I'll mention here, because I already mentioned Trevor Harris and kind of how he spent some of his time getting ready, and obviously the connection with him and Elizondo is going to be exciting to see what that looks like and how quickly that takes the form that was so damn productive in 2016, 17, 18. But in Calgary, Bo Levi Mitchell, when they did their preseason conference call, he was asked about whether or not this is going to be the most difficult season of his career because he doesn't have a whole bunch of big names and a ton of weapons and all the things that we're used to Calgary having, because they've lost in the receiver room, they've lost in the offensive line. So it's like, is Bo going to get hit a lot and not have targets? Because that's kind of what the narrative is going into the season. And then you start to look at it from his perspective, and he's essentially making the case that, no, I'm going to be the best point guard I've ever been. This is an opportunity for me to be the best quarterback I've ever been. And what he meant by that was not throw for the most yards or score the most touchdowns, or his mentality going into the season, which I find fascinating, DT. And it's going to be great for you guys on radio, breaking it down every day throughout the week after you see how he looks, is like in the West, you've got the gunslinger in Michael Riley. You've got the pinpoint passer in Trevor Harris. You've got Cody developing, blossoming into what he's going to be. You got the old warhorse in Zach Collaros, who's going to just be slinging it sidearm and finding people and working with Andrew Harris. And then you've got Bo, and Bo might have to take on a different shape in 2021. And what he's saying is, I want to be able to get through progressions better than ever. I want to use more receivers than ever. I want to be more multiple than ever. I want to see the entire field. I want to direct the offense in a different way. And I'm like, this is going to be the same playbook essentially, but this offense might actually look and feel different as the season goes on.
Yeah, he talked about using more receivers, and he doesn't, because that receiving core, apart from Kamar Jordan and second-year Hergy Mayala, has been decimated the last 3 off seasons, well, 2 off seasons, whatever you want to call it, 2020. And then Aaron Peck retired this week, and you go, well, that's a guy who was probably penciled into a starting spot. So Markeith Ambles, Kamar Jordan, Hergy Mayala, maybe another Canadian.
He mentioned Salgado. Like he mentioned
Salgado.
Yeah, he mentioned as a true, like, real productive player as a global. And then when that was brought up on the conference call, Dave Dickinson said, well, we've got a pretty good depth at global, so it'll be interesting to see how that kind of shakes out. And my first thought was, why do you need depth at global? You're only playing 1 this year. So I was like, I don't know why that's a big issue that you would want that. But anyways, when he mentioned him, I was going, whoa, if we're mentioning globals for Calgary's receiving group, I'm like, how fast does that change? And he also mentioned Colton Hunchak, who, again, the final draft pick in the 2019 draft, had a very nice year in 2019. But if they can turn Colton Hunchak into a real player, not just like a replacement level guy that comes in and gives you, 15, 20, 25 catches. If they can actually find a way to access him with Mayala, then that's your Canadian receiving group. Yes, Sindani is around and all the rest, but that feels like that's probably going to be kind of your core of your national group, and they can build it out from there. But they might not build it out real quickly because of what you're talking about.
Well, and I saw some of the quotes. I wasn't on the call like you were, but I saw some of the quotes, and they talked about interior offensive line. And Sean McEwen, as we'll talk about later, stud, great replacement at center. If you're going to kick Ucombre Williams out the tackle, Sean McEwen at center, fantastic. 2 guard spots need to be replaced. We've talked about this before. Many candidates, and Ryan Seaver will be the guards. I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, and people are going to yell at me again. But there's a point where you've lost too much talent. Reggie Bagleton was the number 3 receiver in the CFL last year. NFL. Okay, well, Kamar Jordan comes back. Fine. Markeith Ambles comes back from the NFL. Okay. Josh Huff, sure. This is just not Eric Rogers, who is the premier red zone target in the CFL, right? We assume Kamar's fine. There's no Tavares Daniels on this. Yeah. They've gone from what would have been second and third stringers now are forced into the first string. Calgary's, I don't see how Calgary is not in for a long year, even with how good I think Bo Levi Mitchell is. And he can say this is great and it'll help me develop as a quarterback. Guys got to get open, or it just doesn't matter. And guys got to get open. You have to have time, or else it just doesn't matter.
Yeah, I'm with you on that 100%. And I feel like at some point early in the season, we're going to realize that things are different. But my question is, how does it evolve? Because Dickinson's not dumb. Like, he's going to take whatever he sees happening in front of him, and he's going to go, okay, let's evolve, because we got to find something else that's working. And they spoke glowingly about Kadeem Carey as well. And it sounds like, because they were asked about, the depth at running back in behind him, and they said, yeah, we got Antti Leader and we got this guy and that. And he said, Kadeem, we really believe in Kadeem. He's our guy. We think he's got the body type. He's the playing style that works well for us. It sounded like they were going to try to get Kadeem Carey to have essentially a CJ Gable 2019 Edmonton type season, where it's just like, the workload is yours, go. And when I heard that, I'm going, man, if they can't pass protect, they have to run the ball a little bit to try and offset that, to try and protect Bo, and they got to find some targets and work some people in, and then they're relying on one back to get it all done. I'm like, that's a scary equation, man, because if the math doesn't turn out on that, then I'm not saying they're going to go, 3 wins or something like that, but that sounds like a 500 team to me offensively at the very least, whereas I know they've got lots of talent all over the place, and they'll coach them up, and they do a great job every year with that. But in a very competitive West Division, there's a potential that Calgary can have a real slide that I don't think we anticipated at the end of 2019.
Yeah, they haven't been a one running back team since Jerome Messam, right? Like, I don't know if they've tried to be, but here's Don Jackson, and here's Terry Williams, and here's Romar Morris. Romar Morris had a 44-point fantasy game one week, and you're like, who? Romar Morris? What do you mean? Before you said that, I thought they kind of grasped this thing that I've been on, and that the exact running back just doesn't matter when it comes into the running game. To me, it's just the least important part of the running game itself versus blocking and the scheming of it. Guys can hit the hole fast and keep going. And sure, there are differences in how guys make other guys miss and who gets yards after contact and stuff. But I thought Calgary was kind of the poster child for, hey, we get this, and we'll just rotate these guys through. And if Don goes to Hamilton, okay, well, here's Kadeem Carey or Trey Williams or Brandon Wilds or the global player I'm most excited to see, Nico Leonard, the super strong, super fast young man from South Africa. I got to see him go. Just got to see this rugby player just rip it up. I thought they got that, but yeah, if you're hyping the running game, in the Canadian Football League.
No, so no one else was interesting about this, and you and I, as numbers guys, will I think appreciate this. That Dave, and I don't mean to spend my whole time just recapping these conference calls, but they have been interesting. There's been some stuff that's come out here. Is that they announced in that Calgary conference call, I think it was Danny Austin that asked the question of Dickinson. You added defensive assistant and Bob Slowick, who was over in Montreal as the defensive coordinator before. He's come on board. What is that role like? And Dickinson offered up in that answer that he had also hired an offensive assistant, which I believe is VJ something. It's listed on out of respect, I want to get the name right here. I just don't have it off the tip of my tongue, and so I looked it up, and listed as offensive assistant is this name at the bottom of their kind of coaching staff page. And he mentioned that, he's going to work with, I always love when this happens with coaches where they're a little bit older and they say he's going to do the computer stuff. So basically what he's saying is that there's, he's going to do some analytics, and he's going to try to work with them to work on strategy and in-game stuff. And they said he was really good with the numbers, and they just brought him in because they wanted to see what he could do as an offensive assistant. But then he mentioned he played with Hergy Mayala at UConn. And I went, whoa, That guy can't be 25 then. Because Hergy's not and I understand even if it was like a first year versus a fourth year or something like that, I'm like, that still puts him in the window of being really young. And the Stamps brought in this guy to try and work some of the numbers. And I'm wondering how many other teams are are going to be bringing people in, because we just went through a time where coaching staffs were being sliced and diced and removing people, and now we're bringing in basically young offensive assistants with more of an analytical approach. When I had talked to Dave Dickinson in February of 2019, or might have been February 2020, just before the pandemic started, we were up in Collingwood in Ontario at Blue Mountains, and we were doing the press availability for the off-season meetings. And I asked him about kind of his approach off a record, just what was his approach to the numbers game and trying to study Bo versus Nick and how they evaluate people going forward. And Dave basically said to me, it's not really for me. Like, I'm not a real big believer in that stuff. Kind of the Belichick answer where it's like, there's people that do that stuff, but that's not really what I'm about. And I took it at face value. I'm like, okay, he's a football coach. He's been a football player. He understands, he can see it with his eyes better than a lot of other people can. That makes sense. And now they're hiring an offensive assistant where he says, yeah, he's going to do the numbers and he's going to work on in-game strategy and all of this for us. And I'm like, either that's an evolution that Dave picked up during the pandemic where somebody got in his ear and said, this stuff might actually be valuable. Do you want to talk to this guy? Or he was just lying to me and he's always been interested in it, which is actually what I've heard about Belichick, is that he really loves the analytics, but every time he's asked about it, he rolls his eyes in the media.
Oh, yeah. And Belichick's a special case in that he was ahead of the curve and now he's sort of fallen behind the curve. But TJ Vernieri, is that the name?
Yes, TJ. Yeah, sorry. I called him VJ. Yeah. I'm watching too much golf lately, the senior PGA championship. I mean, VJ Singh, still got it. But
yeah, and just on that, every coach everywhere uses analytics.
Yeah.
Like if you know the other team's second down blitz rate on second and long, that's analytics.
Mm-hmm.
It is. That's
yep.
just what that's.
What I told you on the Sports Cage today that I was reading Sprawl Ball, and I love a good book. I love the piece in the introduction where in that book, which is about the kind of the revolution of the 3-point shot in the NBA, and I love the piece where somebody's talking to a player and they say, analytics is dumb. I don't want any of that number stuff, and I would never care about it, and it doesn't have any place in the game. And then he said, oh, yeah, well, what about the value of the corner three? What does that mean to you? And then the player just went up, oh, the corner three is the most important shot in basketball. I mean, it's a foot shorter to the rim, and so the percentages go up. You get a cleaner look most of the time. It's a great drive and kick zone. It's like, dude, that's quantitative and analytics. Like what you just explained there is you're just taking numbers and putting them into word format without actually using the numbers. You just explained the entire argument behind it. So yeah, I'm with you. I think there's a lot of people out there that dive into all of that stuff for sure.
I want to make one point on this because I could go on this all day.
Yes.
People talk about the eye test versus analytics. Ultimately, it's just counting, right? Like if I say, Marshall, how did Mike Filer do? Third quarter, 14 minutes left against Saskatchewan in Week 8. How did Mike Filer do on that run block?
Right.
You'd be like, well, how the hell would I know that? Right? Because he run blocks 350 times a year in 1,000 plays. People just count that. People just have counted that and go, okay, well, this is what we've counted. Yeah. We took it the number of times. We looked at the tape. This is what you and I do, right? We look at the tape. We look at the number of times something good happens, something bad happens, and somehow that becomes useless information to people. That's analytics, so it's garbage. I'm like, no, we just counted the good and bad things that happened.
But when did it become a dirty word? Like and I feel like analytics as a term gets thrown around too much, but it's almost like, and again, not to get too deep on, politics and news and all the rest, but when certain people in the political sphere started to challenge the idea of facts, it was like all science, math, and facts became dirty words. It became this thing where you weren't supposed to be, because, well, they could be making up those numbers. And it's like, no, we're like actually evaluating. And I had a coach way back when who graded offensive linemen. You just brought it up to my memory talking about Filer there. He graded offensive linemen, but he hated analytics. But he graded them.
That's exactly it, right?
And like you're talking
every
about,
day, and always has been in football.
Yeah, and it's always been used as a grading tool going back to Paul Brown. I mean, it was one of the first people where it was like, this is how we're going to evaluate people, and this is how we're going to build our roster. And all of that stuff has always been in play. So yeah, I think we're going to see an increased amount of teams, though, that are going to use that offensive assistant label and bring in people that know what they're doing. The real chunky stuff here from the Saskatchewan Roughriders call that I wanted to bring up was Brandon Labatt, which was an interesting dynamic on that conference call because someone asked the question of what's going on with retirements. And Jeremy O'Day of the Riders says that Brandon Labatt's not going to be playing this year. I don't know if he said that he's retired or he's on the retired list. And then you popped on and you're like, hey, is he like retired, or is he just not playing this year? And the answer was he's just not playing this year. Okay, that's a different, and he's under contract through 22, as you found out as well. So I was glad you asked that question because nobody else in the room was smart enough to, first and foremost, because that would have just slipped through the door and we all just would have been tweeting out, hey, Labatt, retired. And then O'Day would have come out and just been like, no, like 2 weeks later, we would have found out, no, he's just not playing this year. But it certainly creates a different dynamic on that offensive line that's already gone through a little bit of little battle testing, I would say, in the offseason here.
Yeah, J.O. caught us off guard because he said not going to play this year. And some folks did take that as he's retired. I thought we need to double back and make sure. So not going to play this year, apparently has the intention to play in 22. And then Farhan Lalji followed up and said if J.O. had pointed to the restrictions of the season or one of the reasons why Labatt isn't going to play this year. Farhan said if the restrictions are loosened and players have more freedom, will he come back? And J.O. said, I asked him that, and he says it's possible. So he may not be done.
What are the restrictions that are so bad? Like, and I honestly haven't looked at a bunch of them, but I'm wondering what would be the restriction that Brendan Labatt would look at and say, no, that's a disclaimer for me. There's no way I can do that.
Teams are traveling, now the day before the game instead of 2 days before the game. And at no point will the team interact with outside people, right? You go to practice, you go home, and that's it. And there's no differentiation between currently vaccinated and unvaccinated players. There's a lot of, it's very tight on the players as they try to keep COVID from, it's a safety measure, right? Trying to keep COVID far away from the teams as possible, because as we saw in the NFL, the NHL, it can crush a team, and the CFL has no schedule flexibility versus the NHL. So it's just very restrictive on what the players can do. And I can understand why someone might bristle at that. So that's apparently part of, Gio said that's part of what is keeping Brendan away. We haven't heard from Brendan since the end of the 19th season. He's kind of been very intentionally off the radar, which that's all right.
Is he typically that way? Because I don't really know his tendency, but when all this news came out and so many people in Saskatchewan who care about him, and again, this is part of the beauty of having the crazy Rider Nation, is that you guys give a damn about a veteran offensive lineman. Like and I know that a lot of CFL teams do. I experienced it with Peter Diakowski when I was covering Hamilton in my early days in radio. People cared about Peter. What's happening with Peter? Is Peter going to be around? Is Peter going to play? Is Peter healthy? CFL teams have this unique connection to their fans, and people really cared about what Brennan was doing after this news came out. And I just thought, I wonder why he doesn't come out and get out in front of it. But if he's quiet or he doesn't feel like he needs to, then, I mean, to each his own. He doesn't have to do anything. I just thought so many people cared about where he was at and what the reasoning was that he wasn't going to be wearing that uniform this year, that I wondered why he wouldn't want to get out and at least say something.
Yeah, I feel like, and I've just covered him for a season, but I just feel like he's fairly private. I feel like that's the deal. When he came back from injury, it was the first time I had a chance to talk to him because he'd been injured for quite some time. And he was wide open about, oh man, I thought my career was over, and then I had the surgery and it was fantastic, and now I'm ready to come back and just dominate again. But I just get the impression he's fairly private. And I'm like, okay, that's totally fair, because we would eat up every moment of your time. Weyburn's finest, 6-time All-Star, Grey Cup champion, most outstanding lineman in 2013, 181 CFL games, and just a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's a really good interview, and I feel like we would demand a ton of his time as the media. So maybe he just wants to kind of keep that at a distance.
And I say this full well knowing that there are circumstances that happen behind the scenes in people's lives where it doesn't always have to be what people are saying on social media. Oh, he doesn't want to get vaccinated, that's why he doesn't want to be around. Like, it might be as simple as he wants to spend more time with his family. Like he doesn't have to come out in the media and explain he wants to spend more time with his family. He doesn't have to come out and explain to you that a family member is sick and he wants to spend time with them. Like, there's stuff that's private that I think, just the idea of saying, well, why didn't he get in front of a microphone and say something? He doesn't have to. Depending on what it is, he can do whatever the hell he wants. Because people care about him and care about that team so much, I thought it might have been an option for him in the last couple of days here. But hey, if he hasn't done by now, he's probably not going to do it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And what his not playing a year does is just kind of accelerate the Riders' timeline. Jeremy O'Day
Yes.
went and got Evan Johnson from Ottawa in free agency, and Johnson has been a stud in his career so far. 31 games at left guard. He started at right guard. He started at right tackle. He got his imagine this, he's a rookie and he gets a start at right tackle. Oh, it's against the Bombers. No, or pardon me, it was against the Riders. And
Yeah.
it was Willie Jefferson and Charleston Hughes. And that was his day at the office. Like, hey, welcome to your first start at right tackle, kid. But you thought, okay, well, he'll just go in at right guard. Boom, Dan Clark at center. Brendan will be at left guard. And then Brendan steps away and you go, oh, well, Evan Johnson can go back to the position he's played by far the most in the CFL. Slap him in at left guard. We presume Taron Vaughn at left tackle, Dan Clark at center. That center to the left side, rock solid.
Yeah.
The right side, I guess we'll find out because Tacoby Cofield decided to retire. So now there's going to be an absolute brand new face to the Riders starting at right tackle and right guard.
Don't you guys have Quanjo out there?
Cyrus Kouandjo is one of the guys they signed, I think, in advance of 2020. Kouandjo was a big-time player in college, or had a big-time rep in college, and it hadn't worked out. And now right guard, can Brett Boyko be an interior player, though he's been at tackle most of his career? There are 4 rookies to consider, and when I brought that to my partner, Luke Melander, he's like, rookies.
Yeah.
Oh, rookies. Nope. No rookies. First round rookie, cool. It's still a rookie. Like, okay, yeah. So what was a real plus for the Riders in 2019 in depth of we can sustain this injury and this injury. It's not there in for their Canadian players this coming year. So very curious to see what the right side of the O-line looks like day one of camp.
I do think that Jeremy O'Day must have felt pretty good after the Labatt news reaches his doorstep, where he goes, thank God I got Evan Johnson. Holy, or like, thank God I drafted Matlin Riley. Like, oh man, because whether
he's Bandy in the 5th, thank you.
Yeah, like whether he saw it coming or whether he just took a stab at a couple of guys just to add some depth. Like, I guess this is why when you're in the CFL, you draft endlessly to just add depth, because you never know when you're going to have to use the depth. But when you have to use the depth and you have it, oh man, that must be a nice security blanket. And again, I understand that Bandy and anybody else that was in there, even if Schramm was still around, like that would not have been enough of a security blanket to say you're better than Labatt because of what he's done in his career and how much he's respected in the league. But yeah, I mean, yeah, you need to have that depth, certainly. And I do love the idea of both Calgary and Saskatchewan with people saying, you lost Philip Blake, you lost Darius Blake, you lost Dakota Shepley, now you lost Labatt, now you lost Braden Schramm, now you lost Cofield, and Jeremy O'Day just going, yeah, but Evan Johnson, right? Hey, how about that? And then Calgary, you lost Erdos and you lost Shane Bergman, and Huffnagel actually today just kept revolving the conversation back to, yeah, but Sean McEwen, am I right? Like, you try to find the one guy that you think can anchor it, but the unit is the thing that matters. And so, like you say, the unit for Saskatchewan will be tested early in the season to really find some cohesiveness and pieces that work. And I think that it was Craig Dickinson who said this. It might have been somebody else, but so much of offensive line play is about who you're playing next to and how your comfort is, and understanding their splits, the little things, right? When you break the huddle, you get to the line of scrimmage, center gets down on the ball. Okay, where's his footwork at? Where's mine? What is the timing like? How quick is he off the ball? All these things, you have to get into a rhythm. And I honestly believe the best offensive lines are the ones where the center knows exactly what the guards are going to be doing, the spacing on pulling, how far they need to get out in front. It's a dance, man. And you have to know who you're dancing with. And when you're dancing with 5 men who are around 300 pounds, it's a really, really delicate dance. And if you mess it up, there's some big collisions and your quarterback's getting hit. So they got to find that cohesiveness. They have to find a way to get together with that group and find the 5 relatively quickly, albeit in a long training camp, and then just get the reps over. It's going to be, if you're at training camp for the Riders, it's going to be boring, I think, watching that offensive line once they have it sorted out. Because, man, the amount of walkthrough periods they're going to have to just hammer stuff home is going to be endless.
Hey, if anybody can get them together, it's Dan Clark, who is Saskatchewan's version of Chuck Norris. Trying. Filled the Capital Point hole. He solved the co-op refinery dispute. He's kicked COVID's ass. Dan Clark.
Yes.
This country's Chuck Norris. Just saying.
In I believe Jurassic Park, the Tyrannosaurus Rex was not running from Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris, no, that's not how that goes. It was backwards. Okay, very good. All right, so let's move on to our next topic here for you.
Franchise. We heat on Twitter.
We bounce around a couple of different things here. We wanted to jump ahead and talk about what you mentioned that Chezzy decided to go out there and give us the hot take of Darrell Walker and Greg Ellingson being the best receiver duo in the CFL. So we thought we would broach this, have some fun with it. And my first thought when I saw it was, okay, that's the take. That's the excitement of having Darrell Walker because we all know what he can do. But my thinking on this right away was...
So make me fight you. You're going to make me fight you with what comes next.
Darrell Walker is going into a situation that, it's green and gold and it's Edmonton and it's his third tour of duty and all the rest. But why do we feel like he can be with Greg Ellingson, this insanely productive player that he really hasn't been in a couple of different places, including Edmonton, albeit with a different quarterback, including having somebody like an Adarius Bowman alongside of him? When I'm looking at Brandon Banks and Braylon Addison, they've already played together with the same quarterback, with the same offensive coordinator. There's continuity that can go there. And I know that numbers do not play. I felt like an idiot doing this when I mentioned it on the sports cage, but numbers don't play well predominantly on an audio format, which makes the idea of the breakdown a little tough sometimes. But I do want to mention that, and again, I this is kind of taken out of context because it's Toronto numbers and there was so much going on with Toronto's passing game in 2019. But Ellingson and Walker, if you look at their 2019, they combined for 37% of their respective teams' targets, albeit not the same offense, not fighting each other for those targets. And their production grade was 55 for Walker and 58 for Ellingson. So again, combined 37%, and combined their production grade that I grade out through each game, each target, each throw was 113. For Hamilton, Brandon Banks had 26%. Now I want you to realize how stupid that is. 26% of targets, in the offense for passing. That is equivalent basically to what Andrew Harris gets in the ground game, which is like of total team rushing attempts across the league. He gets like X amount. It gets up around like 30% sometimes. So the idea of Banks being 26%, that was a heavy workload. Addison had 19.4%, which was more than Darrell Walker got in Toronto, which that again speaks more to Toronto's issues. But the production grade, Banks had a higher production grade by 0.4 than Darrell Walker did in Toronto. Addison had the highest production grade of all four of these guys: Walker, Ellingson, Banks, and Addison. Addison was the most productive player, and he did not get the number of touches that I think was required of him or that he should have gotten in the passing attack. I think that's going to be corrected in 2021. So I'm looking at this and saying, if Addison is motivated, which I really believe he is, and he comes in and he gets more touches and they lean more on Banks as well, why would those two guys not be the most productive receivers in the Canadian Football League?
I think I think that they're clearly number two. For me, number one, number two, and then there's a big gap to number three. There's no player in the league right now like Braylon Addison, receiving threat. Oh, hey, all our running backs are hurt. We'll just have Braylon Addison run the ball. I think he had 40 carries from the running back position in 2019. You're not doing that with anybody else. Maybe Nick Dembski, but not to that same extent.
No.
Like Addison is a truly unique player. Banks is incredible. Like watching Banks in, who is what, 5'7", 5'8", 5'9",
5'7", 165 essentially.
Watching him win jump balls downfield, like contested catches downfield. I don't know how he does that. That's incredible. It's not just speed with that guy. They are phenomenal. What we don't have from Braylon Addison is CFL track record, right? We have Greg Ellingson, star. Darrell Walker, 1,600 yards 1 year, star. To me, they're opposite sides of the field. That's beautiful. I love it. Ellingson's the guy to me who revolutionized this field side the last 5 years. Walker is, hey, I don't need the waggle. I'm just going to kill you off the line. And when I want to play, I'm going to be the best player in the Canadian Football League. The want to play thing, we can dive into a little bit. People have, to me, used Toronto last year as an example of, okay, well, it was a problem for him. I just had to pull it up because to me, it wasn't Darrell Walker that was the problem in Toronto. It was the fact that quarterback was such an issue with the Argos last season. Yeah. Walker had 62% of his targets be accurate passes in 2019. That was 7th lowest in the CFL. CJ Gable, who's the top receiver on this list? Ricky Collins had 76% of his targets be accurate. Darrell was 70 or 62. And then Devere Posey had the lowest number at 55. If you don't give the guy a chance to succeed, what can we truly expect of him? If that ball's airmailed over his head, he's running an in route instead of shoes. Well, if he catches that, God bless him, but I cannot put that on Darrell Walker. So his numbers look bad. What was it, 60-something catches last year? But to me, that wasn't in any way reflective of what Walker can be, because we've seen the guy put up 1,500 plus yards.
Yeah, I think the thing that jumps out to me the most about if he's going to have a great season, which I do, like I don't want my comments to be misconstrued where people are saying Darrell Walker's a bum, he's not going to play well at all, he's going to have 100 yards catching on the year. He's not. He's going to go for 1,000. Like, I feel very comfortable he's going to go for 1,000.
Oh, yeah.
Greg Ellingson's going to go for 1,000, even in the 14 games. Like, I don't care. They're going to get their 1,000 yards this season, and I think that they've got an opportunity to be able to have a third name get involved in that party too. But my question mark going in here, GT, is that how much can Elizondo turn Darrell Walker's skill set, ability, speed, hands? How much can he access that in the same way that Trevor Harris was able to in Ottawa with essentially Chris Williams, right? Like working in that boundary side wide receiver spot. Can they turn him into an ultra productive boundary wide receiver and hit those home run shots to him down the sideline, down the rail? Can you throw the skinny post? Can you motion him in and have him run little crossing routes underneath, catch, turn up the field, get lots of yak yard, whatever? There's different ways that they can access him. Chris Williams was a different player than Darrell Walker, obviously, but
Deontay Spencer too, right?
Yeah. And so being able to get maximum production out of that spot, because we've seen what Trevor Harris's skill set is so good for field side guys, which is honestly why I think Ellingson has been that 5-year revelation to the wide side that you're talking about, is that he can get through progression so quickly. His release is so quick. There's one clip that I love of Trevor Harris, and I don't know why I clipped this and saved it, but maybe for coach's film in 25 years, if I ever get around to that I saw that he took the snap and it was in the shotgun. Obviously he takes the snap and he looks to the left, and it's just like a spacing play. So everybody's run their hooks and reading the releases of the linebackers and finding the empty zone and hooking up at 3, 4, 5 yards, whatever. And so he ends up taking the snap, looking to his left, boundary slot back, Will linebacker flies out underneath that. So he comes back to the field side, and the Sam flies out underneath the number 3 receiver. The halfback is all over the back of the number 2 receiver, the slot receiver. And at that point, he's already gone from 1 to 2 to 3, and he's still grabbing the laces. Like, he grabs it, goes, dut, 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 and he processes things so incredibly quickly that he ended up actually going back to the boundary, checking to see if it was open yet, getting off of that and coming back to the wide side wide receiver where the corner had fallen off because it was some sort of hold coverage down low. And so he should have just probably gone to the wide receiver on the wide side first, but he went from boundary slot back to 3 to 2, back to boundary slot back to the field side. And he did it in about 1.5 seconds. And you can actually see his helmet go check, 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 check. Got it. Bang. And the ball comes out. So when I think of Elizondo working with Trevor Harris, the processing speed and being able to work with Greg Ellingson, I think Ellingson is going to have a way better statistical season, honestly, than Darrell Walker. And so that's in this conversation of where we are going with the best duos, I'm looking at it and saying, yeah, Darrell Walker's a hell of a player. Greg Ellingson's a hell of a player. But Trevor Harris and Jamie Elizondo in that offense, I think Ellingson's going to be the star. In Hamilton, I don't know. I don't know if it's going to be Banks or if it's going to be Addison. I think Addison's going to have a more productive year based on what I've seen, reading the tea leaves, all the rest, and people in Hamilton will go, oh my God, how is that even possible? Speedy's our hero. Yeah, he's a great player. But I think Addison's got something special for you in 2021. And I'm trying to do the math here on if Ellingson is great and Walker is real good, can Addison be great to the level of Ellingson And can Speedy be better than Darrell statistically? And when I'm doing that math and the equation of the offense and the system and the style and the quarterback to me, the answer is yes. So that's why I lean Hamilton as the best duo over Edmonton. But like you say, after that, Saskatchewan, I think, with Kieran Moore is right there alongside Shaq Evans. But Shaq is, to me, kind of like a number 4, 5, 6 overall type guy. And then Kieran Moore he drops in a little bit in the order.
Kyron's never had 1,000 yards yet.
Right.
So, yeah.
And so, and they've got other pieces. So it's not like it's a game of only 2 players. And I mean, Williams Lambert and Justin McKinnis and William Powell's going to do his thing and all the rest. So
NBA Jam's a 2-player game, and that's where we're at. Yeah,
I know. But it's just in terms of the overall picture of the offense. And then you mentioned Montreal as well, being able to look at BJ Cunningham and Gina Lewis. I like those guys a lot. But the problem with Montreal looking in this game is that so much of that conversation for them is infringing upon, and I honestly think this is the most divisive conversation perhaps in the entire CFL right now. Does Vernon Adams Jr. get better or worse? Because it seems like nobody wants to say, well, he stays the same. So I saw Joey Alfieri from TSN 690 in Montreal saying, like, Vernon's going to get better this year. I've seen people in and around Montreal saying he's going to get better. He's going to refine. And you and I are both saying, well, I don't know if you can hit on the deep ball as much as you did previously. I don't know if people are going to drop interceptions when you make bad decisions. Can you avoid those bad decisions? So the idea of putting Montreal in a best receiver duo conversation, especially when you have Stanback, who's going to deserve the football, that's hard.
Marshall,
that's hard to do.
You're abusing the rules of the game here, buddy. These are the 2 receivers I want. So you would be Banks and Addison 1, Walker, yes. Ellingson 2.
Yep. Yeah, I would go there. And then my 3, I go Brian Burnham and anybody.
Rhymes on that boundary side wide receiver with him.
Yeah, and I told you before we started this that my problem is that I have so much respect for so many of these guys that I constantly am contradicting myself on who the best is and because every time I think about them, I start salivating as an ex-quarterback and going, oh my God, can you imagine? Like, Brian Burnham would draw so much attention in the style of offense that I played in that I would be able to just look at him and feed everything off of it, and everybody else would be open by 5 more yards because there'd be coverage just rolling that direction. So that's why I say Burnham and anybody. But I mean, outside of that, Toronto, I think, is probably the biggest question mark in this conversation because we're not sure who's going to make the team. Like, we know that there's going to be some predominant names, Breskison, and we understand Eric Rogers and Dejon Brissett's going to probably play the wide receiver spot as a national. But I mean, it seems like the top of the rankings, I think, has to be Hamilton with their duo, Edmonton with theirs. And from there, it kind of shakes out based on preference and what you believe they're going to look like this year.
So BC 3, I agree. BC is 3. Here's what I put together. And I felt bad because there was a real debate for me of, okay, well, Tavares Daniels, Eric Rogers, the guys I presume will be the boundary side for Toronto. Mm-hmm. Rogers gets more red zone targets than anybody, but that was Calgary. How's this different? Why did Calgary let him go? I left them out of the top 5. I had Gino Lewis and BJ Cunningham because I think people with his year off forgot BJ Cunningham was a real baller. Shaq and Kyron of Saskatchewan at 4. Burnham and Dominic Rhymes at 3. I had Banks and Addison at 2 and Ellingson Walker at 1. To me, Ellingson Walker is 2 of the top 5 receivers in the league last year. Now they play on the same team. Phenomenal. Walker. I was trying to pull this up because it was a conversation I had with Shaq Evans, and he talked about, because it's in Shaq's benefit as a wide receiver, to point out the fact that it's harder to get open when you don't use the waggle. And I thought, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. Banks had 134 targets with the waggle. Addison had 106 targets at the waggle. Both of them are about 80% waggle targets versus Darrell Walker, who rarely uses the waggle at all and just has to get open. Press coverage, I got to beat this. I got to get this open. That's to me, there's a zillion reasons why I went to Walker and Ellingson 1-2, but that's probably the closest divide other than 5-6 in my mind of the split between the one I picked first and second. But neither one of those teams is sad that they have incredible American receivers, the ones that they do. And by the way, when they all meet in the Grey Cup, we'll settle this on the field.
Yeah. I don't know why I have this in my iTunes library here, but hey, I have it. I might as well play for you. Jeremiah Masoli on Braylon Addison. This is from, looks like 2020. Oh no, that was last play. This is from 2018. I think this might have been Addison's first year in the CFL.
And he's just a smart guy. Obviously, he played quarterback in high school, so that helps. You can tell he's very quarterback friendly. Almost in the same lane as Luke is. Just understanding defenses and just little things that he does just help him get open and yeah.
There you go. A little background for you on why Jeremiah likes him. And it's funny that he mentions Luke there because the radar has officially turned off on Luke Tasker at this point. No big retirement announcement, anything else. It's just gone dark and hasn't really made any leeway where it sounds like he's going to be coming back. I talked to somebody a while ago who said that he might have had some interest from a couple of different teams, and he was basically holding out to see if he could get what he wanted to come back into Hamilton. But we haven't heard anything. Maybe it's one of those things that they're like keeping quiet until the start of training camp, and then he bursts through a big Ticats sign at the start of the and they do a big promotional video at Tim Hortons Field. I'm not sure, but yeah, for Jeremiah to put the Luke label on Braylon that early in 2018, I think that explains why he's had some success in the 2 years there.
Yeah, Devere Posey, Brandon Banks, Braylon Addison. If Luke Tasker is there, come on. What are we doing here? Come on.
Yes.
Come on. 12-2. I'm just throwing out 12-2. Not for any particular reason, but I'm just throwing out 12-2 adjacent to the Hamilton Tiger Cats. But I love that conversation. I love trying to figure out how these new duos especially are going to work together, or in Hamilton's case, how the evolution of Braylon Addison is going to be, because hey, if the running backs are healthy, we don't need to, but we can, because that's a real nice way to screw up with defenses. What are Burnham and Rhymes going to look like together? Rhymes, who dominated in some games for a bad team in Ottawa. It brings us closer to football, Marsh.
I'm with you. We had something planned here that we were going to do, but because I'm an idiot and ramble a bunch because we get excited about these things, I actually want to save our big piece that we had for next week's podcast.
Nice.
I promise that it will be worth your wait for everybody out there, because we wanted to do something themed around Canada Day, dealing with Canadian players. But stick around for that. That will come out next week. But I do want to ask you here before we wrap things up, DT, the idea of the odds coming out. There were so many great props that came out this week. There were over-unders for wins. I saw you tweeting about that. There is some juicy stuff out there for people that wanted to play some wagers, as we know that this is kind of coming to reality very quickly and coming to a CFL game day experience near you. I'm starting to wonder at what point you guys are going to be told that, on play-by-play in Saskatchewan, that you got to start referencing over-unders and live updating prop bets and things of that nature. Because as broadcasters, it's going to become part of the lexicon, which I never could have expected when I got into doing all of this stuff. But I thought some of the numbers, because you just mentioned 12-2 for Hamilton, which is why I wanted to bring this up. Some of the numbers were funny, man. Like I saw Edmonton's win total, and you and I are both on board with Edmonton. I saw their over under for win total. I was like, what are we doing? Like, they have to be over that.
Oh yeah. So these are all from Bodog. They put out 17 prop wagers, futures wagers for the season. The Edmonton Elks over under win total came out at 5. Would they finish better than 5-9? And you cannot believe how fast I jumped on that. Like over. I hammered it to the max isn't very high, but I hammered it for as much as I could, because that is the easiest bet on the board. Alouettes is 6, Red Blacks is 3.5, Argos is 6.5, Stampeders are 7. Basically, there's a lot of the wagers on Bodog that went with what did 2019 look like? Okay, we'll use that to judge 2021. And man, there are a ton of opportunity. I can give you incredible ways to make money, and a real long shot one that I think might surprise people, but it could really help you in the pocketbook.
Yes, for all of that and more, listen to the Sports Cage. It's on your radios each and every weekday. Let people know what they can expect coming up this week, because I know that you guys are continuing to ramp things up around there. It's crazy to think that players are essentially reporting for camps and then they still have to sit around for a week.
Yeah, exactly. So next week we'll be loaded with board riders from their hotel room.
Yes.
It'll be great to be talking football with them. Wednesday, we're off for Canada Day. So Wednesday is Glenn Suter and Fine Tailored Suits, when we'll talk some about the best Canadian players in the CFL, Farhan Lalji, and we have a special day on Wednesday as we amplify Aboriginal or First Nations voices within our community, Indigenous voices. So we're very excited about that. It's part of an initiative our station and roughly 400 other stations across the country are involved in the day before Canada Day. So we're super excited about that.
Awesome. That is excellent. That's great to hear. And again, it's one of those things that we should have been doing regularly. I think everybody is realizing more and more that it's taken far too long to have that recognition come to place. But I was watching a CBL game. I think it actually might have been the Rattlers out near a year against my Hamilton Honey Badgers the other day, and they had orange shirts on that had every person matters, every child matters, all the rest on as well, because of everything that's come out with the residential schools recently. And I thought, man, good on Mike Morielli and the people from the CEBL for being able to bring that to the forefront and have that be visually apparent on the sidelines, because you see that so many times where it's NBA cares and they just like throw a random organization on a t-shirt, and it's like, no, the CBL is uniquely Canadian, as is the CFL, and for them to have uniquely Canadian rights, I think, being expressed and being advertised that need to have that increased awareness that's a really good thing. So I'm happy to hear that you guys are doing that, and a lot of other places are buying in on that as well. There was no A block this week. I just wanted to give a quick programming note here. I got stood up twice. Once it was because of a scheduling snafu. The other time the person just forgot to call in. So I ended up, hey, this thing's
Sorry,
happening.
buddy. I didn't mean to. I feel bad. You're talking about me in the third person there, but
I'm not going to bury anybody. I'm not going to use any names, Derek. But yeah, it was. I told my fiance what happened. She goes, "Oh no! So what are you going to do? I mean, people didn't get the show this week." I said, "Listen, digital audio podcasting. If they don't show up, and I tried twice, I can't do the show. I'm sorry. I apologize for not having the show up, but so I want to let you guys know about that. Make sure that you are tuning in to Thursday's All Canadian, because Wade and Connor have some exciting news and updates about what's happening around the OUA, the football season. They've been talking to some people, and they've got some updates on all of that for university football, which is, of course, just around the corner as well. And we're excited to be able to bring you lots of that coverage here on CFP as well. That will do it for us today. At DT on SC, make sure that you are following Derek Taylor at TSN_Marsh. Go there for Formula One tweets and pictures of my dog if you enjoy those. And we will talk with you coming up next week right here on Canadian Football Perspective. Thanks as always for checking out the breakdown. And thank you as always as well to CFP supporters and sponsors for being able to make this a reality. As you mentioned off the top here, Fox 40, Sawdust City, use those promo codes CFP15 to get 15% off at Fox 40. And CFL is the promo code for free shipping from Sawdust City Beer. Thanks for listening. Talk to you next week.